The story I am about to tell is one of the darkest and most heartbreaking crimes in modern history. It is the case of Junko Furuta, a Japanese high school student whose life was cut short in a way so cruel that it shocked the world and left scars in Japanese society that are still remembered today. This is not just the story of a murder. It is the story of innocence destroyed by cruelty, of justice that failed to deliver closure, and of the human capacity for both compassion and brutality. Junko Furuta was born on January 18, 1971, in Misato, Saitama Prefecture, Japan. By all accounts, she was a bright, cheerful, and hard-working teenager. At just 17 years old, she was already admired for her kindness and diligence. Teachers described her as disciplined, responsible, and focused on her studies. Friends remembered her as someone who was polite, friendly, and not involved in trouble. She had dreams, like so many teenagers do. Junko was planning to work after graduation, and she was considering a stable career. She had recently taken a part-time job, and she was excited about what her future could bring. She was a normal girl, full of hope, stepping into adulthood with a sense of optimism. But fate placed her in the path of 4 young men who would shatter everything. The central figure among them was Hiroshi Miyano, a local delinquent known for his connections to the Yakuza, the Japanese organized crime syndicate. Miyano carried himself with arrogance, often intimidating others, and he surrounded himself with other boys who reveled in violence and control. Along with his accomplices, Joe Ogura, Shinji Minato, and Yasushi Watanabe, Miyano embarked on a path of cruelty that would ultimately destroy Junko's life. The nightmare began on November 25, 1988. Junko was riding her bicycle home after finishing a part-time shift. Along the way, she was spotted by Miyano and Minato. Miyano devised a plan. He instructed Minato to kick Junko off her bike and then run away. As expected, when Junko was attacked, Miyano appeared shortly afterward, pretending to be a passerby who wanted to help. He offered to walk her home safely, pretending to be her rescuer. But instead of taking her home, he lured her into a warehouse where he revealed his true nature. He threatened her with his gang connections, claiming that if she resisted, he would have her family killed. In that moment, Junko's freedom was stolen, and she was forced into captivity. What followed was 44 days of horror that would later be called the most cruel crime in Japan. Junko was taken to the home of Minato, where she was imprisoned. The parents of Minato were aware that she was being held there, yet out of fear or negligence, they chose not to intervene. The 4 boys subjected Junko to relentless abuse. She was beaten, assaulted, and deprived of even the most basic human dignity. Reports later revealed that she was tortured in ways so cruel that they are almost impossible to believe. She was starved, burned, humiliated, and forced to endure unimaginable pain day after day. The cruelty was not hidden. In fact, the boys invited other friends and acquaintances to participate in the abuse. At least a dozen people were aware of what was happening. Yet nobody came to her rescue. Some were too afraid of the gang connections, others simply indifferent. The silence of so many around her turned the house into a prison of hopelessness. Despite the horror, Junko fought to survive. Witnesses later recalled that she sometimes pleaded for her captors to simply end her life, but at other times she begged to be freed, to see her parents again. Her will to live flickered like a fragile candle in the storm of cruelty. On January 4th, 1989, after 44 days of captivity, the unimaginable finally ended. Junko's body gave out after relentless torture. Her captors placed her lifeless remains into a drum filled with concrete and abandoned it. She was just 17 years old. The discovery of Junko's body came weeks later. When police investigated, the shocking truth began to emerge. Details of the torture leaked to the press, and the Japanese public reacted with horror and outrage. The brutality inflicted upon a young, innocent girl seemed almost unreal, and it raised urgent questions about the society that allowed it to happen. When the trial of the perpetrators began, there was widespread anger. The four boys were under 20 at the time of the crime, and because of Japan's legal system, they were treated as juveniles. Despite the enormity of their crime, they avoided the death penalty. Instead, they received relatively light sentences, between 4 and 20 years in prison. For the public, these punishments felt like an insult to Junko's memory. How could such cruelty be met with such leniency? Many believed that justice had failed. The aftermath for the perpetrators varied. Some of them reoffended after their release, committing further crimes. Their names, although originally protected under Japanese law due to their age, were eventually leaked by journalists who believed the public deserved to know. To this day, those names remain infamous, tied forever to an act of pure evil. The story of Junko Furuta has lingered in the public imagination for decades, not only because of its brutality, but because of the uncomfortable truths it revealed. It showed how peer pressure, gang culture, and the silence of bystanders can allow evil to flourish. It showed how vulnerable individuals can be targeted, and how systems of justice can sometimes fail to deliver closure to victims and their families. Junko's parents were devastated. They had raised a daughter who was hardworking, respectful, and full of promise, only to lose her in the most horrifying way imaginable. Their grief was compounded by the knowledge that the killers would one day walk free, while their daughter never could. Today, when people remember Junko Furuta, they do not only remember the cruelty of her death, they also remember the brightness of her life. She was more than a victim. She was a daughter, a friend, a student, a young girl with dreams. She represents all the potential that was stolen not only from her, but from the world. The case has also been used as a reminder of the dangers of youth violence, the influence of gangs, and the importance of protecting the vulnerable. It has inspired books, articles, and discussions in Japan and abroad about crime, punishment, and the responsibilities of society. What makes Junko's story so haunting is not only what happened, but what it symbolizes. It forces us to confront the darkest aspects of human nature, the capacity for cruelty, the willingness of some to stand by in silence, and the failure of institutions to deliver justice. At the same time, it reminds us of the responsibility we all share, to speak up, to protect others, and to ensure that the memory of victims like Junko is never forgotten. Even today, decades later, Junko Furuta's name continues to appear in documentaries, discussions, and online forums. Her story is retold not to sensationalize, but to warn, to educate, and to remember. The world cannot bring her back, but by telling her story, people can ensure that her suffering was not in vain. In the end, Junko's life and death leave us with a painful but powerful lesson: that evil thrives when good people stay silent, Her story challenges us to reflect on our own choices, on whether we would have the courage to speak out, to intervene, to protect the vulnerable. It reminds us that justice is not automatic, that it must be demanded, defended, and fought for. Junko Furuta was only 17. She had her whole life ahead of her. She deserved to grow up, to laugh, to love, to live a full life. Instead, her name became tied to one of the cruelest crimes ever recorded. And yet, in remembering her, we refuse to let that cruelty define her completely. We remember her not only as a victim, but as a human being whose life mattered. The tragedy of Junko Furuta is a scar on society, but it is also a call to action. To build a world where no young girl, no innocent soul, ever has to suffer the same fate again.